Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
Okay. I'm here with Jason from 2-Bit Podcast. What's going on, man?
Not much, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the Friend or Fed. I don't know if I said thank you enough for that, but it was great.
Yeah, that was
I
fun.
think we were going to tap out 4 hours, and then you came on and we did 6. So
Yeah, that was fun. I had a good time. I looked up and I saw that like we were at 6 hours, and I was like, oh shit, was I on here that long? Fuck.
that's always my favorite reaction. You know, with the Dave Smith one, we went, I think, 5 hours in total. And when Dave commented on it, which started off that whole like mini little libertarian spurg storm, you know, a lot of people are like, it's 5 hours. I'm like, you know, you don't have to watch the whole thing, right? Like you can watch watch 15 minutes of it, or I don't know, whatever you want to do. Like it shouldn't be intimidating, but
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. It's people make me laugh. So.
Well, I like the idea of the 24-hour one.
I don't know about 24 hours, but I would like to do maybe 12. I kind of have a offshoot idea that was just kind of spinning around my head this morning of doing some sort of like iDissident kind of thing where, you know, once a month just do a big round table of all the distant voices out there. You know, because I think the future is going to be collecting more left-wing voices out there as well, who are starting to cotton on to the fact that there's something bigger going on that isn't just about electing the right people to political positions. Yeah. You know, I think guys like Jimmy Dore and a few others are kind of on that cusp of going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is outside of our Overton window, and maybe we should be talking to some of these right-wing crazies. You know, which, I mean, I still don't even consider myself right-wing. It's just, it's more like, you know, that's kind of the camp that I'm, you know, kind of in by default almost.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It became
leftist because
it became the default position. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I kind of adopting Orthodoxy. It's sort of like you kind of become right wing by default with a lot of that kind of mindset. But I also just don't see it as a zero-sum game. You know, in some ways, I don't really dig that whole I'm not left, I'm not right kind of mampy shit. But at the same time, it's like, well, you know, I guess I'm right wing now because I can't talk to leftists. Like, as you know, or also it's not even I can't talk to them. It's like I know what they're going to say. Like I've read the script. I was on that side for a very long time. It's like I know the next few things that are coming out of your mouth are going to be, you know, X, Y, Z, and it's like it's boring, you know. So
you would
but thanks for having me on, brother.
Yeah, no doubt. We were talking on Friend or Fed there towards the end about you becoming Orthodox and how that was kind of like your like came from your family and you just felt naturally that's where you belonged. What led you to going back in that direction though? Because I think that's the story of how people are finding or rediscovering faith in their lives is pretty interesting.
So, okay, brief history of me. My mother and father divorced when I was 1. So I was largely raised, and my mother was working a lot of shift work. So I was partly raised by my mother's grandparents. Sorry, my mother's parents, my grandparents, my maternal parents. My grandfather became a surrogate father for me. Now he's the he's where my last name comes from, Miranchuk. He's Ukrainian, or he was Ukrainian Polish, by ethnicity. I think he was the firstborn in Canada. His relationship with his family and with all things Slavic was very strained because he came from a very, almost traditional horror show kind of family where, stories of his father was brutal, and a lot of his brothers turned out to be criminals and all this other kind of stuff. So he kept us sort of at a very big arm's length from a lot of that. I mean, I remember growing up and he was saying that if ever someone comes up to you and goes, "Oh, my Russian brother," he was like, "Watch out for the knife." So he had a very different relationship. I mean, he was born in 1916, so this is World War One times when people forget, or people don't talk about the Ukrainian Hungarian concentration camps that were happening in Canada. I think a lot of sentiment towards Eastern Europeans, were called Hungies, was negative. So I think he kind of wanted to protect the family from that. So growing up, religion was sort of around, but it wasn't a big deal. My aunt Ellen was the more religious, almost nut of the family. She was Russian Orthodox, but she went to a Roman Catholic church. And when I asked her about that one time, she was like, "Yeah, it's closer." I'm like, "Oh, there you go." But the long story short, my grandfather died of a prolonged cancer death between I was 11 and 12. And that's where I broke from the church and God, mostly out of anger and resentment, because at that time I had been kind of taught that God is all loving, all kind, and all that kind of example, Jesus meek and mild.
Right.
And I couldn't reconcile those two things. So I kind of walked away from it, and so I often say I was an atheist for 32 years, and for most of that time I didn't really even have a term for it. I don't think I really knew about atheism until I hit high school. And grew up a very sort of a liberal loving household. I was nominally liberal. I was never overly political, although I did read a lot of philosophy and political science. I went through a communist phase when I was about 16, and then I read Gulag Archipelago, and that kind of cured me of that. And I've always been sort of a Slavophile in general, to kind of keep connection to that roots. So flash forward, 2020. So now between that time, when the New Atheists were happening, I was a big Christopher Hitchens fan. Was fully on board with all that stuff. Would tell anyone I was as an atheist, anti-theist. I was, more and more resentful towards the church and religion in general. I had read the Bible many times, but it was really as more of a critique, and in that sort of shitty atheist way, and then a few things started happening before that. Jordan Peterson and his Bible series really opened me up a little bit. And I started seeing other things happening. And I think it was my, I've said recently that on somewhere where I'm like, I one day I hope to live up to my intuition, to be worthy of my intuition. Because I oftentimes see things where I'm kind of intuiting things, but I don't have a language for it yet. But if I look backwards, I'm like, oh, that's when you started to notice something and react to it. And so the Jordan Peterson thing opened me up a little bit, and a few other things where I started softening quite a bit. I think also Sam Harris's response to I was never a big Sam Harris fan, but I was, enough of one. And his reaction to Donald Trump made me go, hang on a second. And I'm not a Donald Trump fan, but, his response was silly. And it made me go, okay, you're not a rational actor here. And when you start seeing one thing, you start questioning other things.
Mm-hmm.
So this all led up to, then I started, so then I got in an accident, almost cut off my thumb, ending my restaurant career, which was like 25 years. COVID happened. My wife was pregnant. My wife gives birth. It's in that interim, I'm getting more and more into, I guess, what we call the dissident right sphere now. And I started to realize that I got a lot of anger and resentment issues that I need to deal with before my daughter's born, because I didn't want to pass it on to my kid. And in that process, I started going backwards, and really where I, my origin story of that stuff was my grandfather's death and my turn away from God. And I just started praying. And this was before my daughter was born. I started saying the Jesus prayer, just kind of as a, just like, oh, just, see what happens. My daughter's born, and she's born in July. By October, I'm having like breakdowns. And I don't know why. I'm not an overly emotional person. My emotional range generally goes from annoyance to like anger and like general like peevishness. So I'm not known for fears. And I was just getting like set off all the time. Rainbow Connection would come on, and there I couldn't know. I just thought maybe new father. I don't know what's going on. There's a lot of pressures going on too. There's COVID going into second lockdown, all this kind of stuff. And it was in that moment where I just got to a really, I call it now a really humble place, where I was just low. I wasn't like depressed. It was just vulnerable. And I kind of cried out to God in that moment. And and the way I describe it is that I felt a presence to speak through me, telling me to bear witness and testify. And I said out loud that, yeah, I can do that. And that was it, and it was so that happened. And then weeks that followed, I'm praying more. I then have to encounter this insane amount of shame, that kind of hit me like a wall. And then I was like, okay, I gotta work this out. Either I'm having a mental breakdown or something's happening. And that's kind of, and it just happened to be, some people were talking about Orthodoxy, and I started looking into it, and that was the religion of my grandfather and my family. Although again, it was never really put on me. And then I just started re-examining everything through that lens, and things started to really start to make sense. And then, shortly thereafter, I talked to my wife, and we made a decision to move to Australia. I'm from Montreal, Canada, originally, and that's where we were living. And we we're going to COVID second lockdowns and all this other stuff. And that's when I turned to my wife and was like, let's examine moving to Australia to be closer to her family. And because she comes from a much larger family. And as Owen Benjamin once said, or has said recently, like, family is wealth, and that's it. And ever since then, I've really kind of felt the presence of God around me. Like I feel like I'm being pulled. And the closer and the more deeper I go into Orthodoxy, specifically, the more I feel that presence. So I don't know if that's a long-winded explanation, but it's the only one I can. It's the only way I can put that together.
No, that's
so yeah, 32 years an atheist, religious experience. Now looking to eventually become a catechumen. Churches down here are really difficult to get to, but
I find it interesting because like it's weird because I found, well, I mean, it's the same thing that led me to libertarianism led me into to looking into Orthodoxy. And it's just looking around, seeing what's going on around me, recognizing that there's something going on that I don't understand, and so I just start reading. And then I started reading about like because I grew up Southern Baptist, really. I mean, my parents weren't really religious when I was growing up. They would put me on a bus to go to church, like not even every Sunday, every once in a while. And then when I was in high school, I got expelled from school and moved down with my grandparents, and they were real involved in church. So I ended up going to church a lot when I lived with them and stuff. And then so I started doing a lot of reading. I started looking around. I started recognizing things and saying, "Hey, this looks familiar." Like I heard about like this kind of like this kind of infiltration of the church. You know, I remember talking to my youth pastor about that back when I was in high school and stuff like that, and how there was this attempt from the secular level to infiltrate the church, and I started recognizing that very early on, and I just started reading, and I started looking into church history and realizing that what I had recognized as the church my entire life wasn't actually like anything to do with the church, and it that kind of meant something to me because I had even gone to like to Messianic Jewish church services, thinking that, well, maybe because that's where it all originated from the Jews, maybe they'll have some answers as to what is going on, what religion actually is, what this Christianity actually is. And I never was able to find it. And then I started reading stuff, and I realized that most of what I thought about Christianity was a construct, and that if I really wanted to learn what Christianity was, I needed to be looking at, you know, Second Temple era Christianity, and that led me to Orthodoxy. And I had heard, you know, obviously I'd heard Matt Erickson talk about it, and you know, Cyprian and other people talk about it, and but I just didn't really understand what it was. And it wasn't until I started looking into it, started talking to Buck a lot, which Buck's not real overly vocal about his faith, but if you talk to him, he'll engage with you and explain to you like why he's on the path he's on. And I really appreciate that, because Buck's one of those guys you can really sit down and have a conversation with, a rational conversation with. You can ask him hard questions, he doesn't get offended by them. And so that it just kind of seemed to me like, okay, I need to at least start looking at this more seriously. And it was funny. I didn't even know I didn't even know I felt this way. And then last weekend, I'm sitting there, and there's a guy that started going to this church that I've been attending shortly before I started attending it, and he comes from a Presbyterian background. So him and Father Michael were talking, and Father Michael looked up at me and he goes, "Hey, we're going to start these inquirers courses and yada yada yada." And so Father Michael walks off, and Steve looks at me. He goes, "So are you going to do the one-on-one courses, or are you going to do the inquirers courses?" And I didn't even think about it. I was just like, I don't know. I'm just going to do whatever he tells me to do, because what the hell do I know? Like, you know, it's like, I don't know what the hell I don't know what's going on. So I'm just going to do what he tells me to do. I'm going to try to figure out what's going on. And then, you know, from there, then we'll make decisions after that. But I don't even know what the hell's going on. So yeah, it's really odd how that kind of Gnostic point of view that I always had, that I could gain the knowledge to understand what was going on, led me in the direction to where I'm like, oh yeah, there's no way I'm going to gain enough knowledge to figure out what the hell's going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, a few things on that. Like, I think that I think you're on the right path when you get humbled. When, and I mean that, you know, from a religious standpoint, obviously, but I think in any kind of pursuit of knowledge or anything like that, it should humble you to a certain degree or completely. You know, I've been Caleb Brown and I are going to do an Evola series, and I've been listening, doing the audiobook of Ride the Tiger. And he's one of those guys who just humbles you. Carlisle humbles me with his use of language, and there's a few other guys out there who just you encounter them, you're like, wow, okay, like there's levels to this, and that's so, especially with Orthodoxy. Yeah, like I said, I have been reading religion from such a resentful position for so long that it's easy to caricature certain religions. It's easy to lump it all together and just say, Christianity is everything from Lutherans to Anabaptists to, and put it all in one big soup and criticize that soup. And I think the New Atheists did a very good job at tearing down certain things from certain religions or from certain standpoints that needed to be criticized. I think Hitchens especially. I think he's still valuable in some ways because I think he did it courageously at a time when that was not going to be popular, and some things needed to be said. But then you realize that what Hitchens was really railing against is a sort of the Anglican kind of tradition, and which is what he knew. I'm not trying to throw shade on anyone's faith, but Anglicans are different than Orthodoxy. Roman Catholics are different than Orthodoxy. Some of the problems that are prevalent in those religions that we would easily criticize are either not in Orthodoxy or are expressed in different kind of ways. So, especially with a sort of more mystical element to things, I'm not using this stuff. I know there's been a lot of conversations, and I've been on a lot of message threads where the Roman Catholics and Orthodox are kind of going on at each other and talking about Filioques and historical blah blah blah, and it comes down to wanting to be right. I don't really care about being right anymore. I want to be true, and that to me is following intuition, which I'm pretty convinced is sort of the voice of God moving through you, and following that intuition and just submitting to it as much as possible. And then let things kind of take care of themselves a little bit. I get it. People, intellectual ego and vainglory and all the rest of it is a bitch. It's a hard one to overcome. But yeah, I'm not interested in being right anymore, because that's the other thing. But we have a religious experience like I had, coming from an atheist position. It's like, okay, so I'm wrong. Not just about it's not a math question. It's like I'm wrong about reality, and I gotta work that out. So it was incredibly humbling. Yeah, and so to talk about you get into like what Jordan Peterson's talking about, which is go in there and fix churches. Like that's the least humble thing you can possibly do. Like if you've never been to a church service, or if you haven't you've been divorced from the church for a long time, the last thing you should do is go in there and try to fix anything. Like go in there and receive, and then see where things kind of sit with you. And I'm even for people who are drawn to Lutheranism, which I just think is demonic. But I mean, hey, go to the church that draws you.
Right.
I don't think going in there with the idea to fix something is the mentality you should have. It should be a much more humble kind of experience, but that's just me.
Yeah, no, I've heard I think Father Stephen DeYoung talk about this and how he sees that kind of mindset from a lot of different places, especially since Orthodoxy kind of has a place on the internet now and is kind of making its way through different circles that you you hear that a lot about, yeah, we need to fix this, and this is how we're going to go in there and fix this. And it's like, you've been Orthodox for 5 minutes. Like, what are you going to fix? You don't know what you're talking about, So, and I think, like you said, there's humility in that, and like I don't claim to understand the Orthodox liturgy. I don't claim to understand any of it. Like I just know that there's something happening, and I can't figure out. I mean, I think I know what it is, but at the same time, I just kind of sit there and observe. I don't really even participate at this point, just because I'm just absorbing everything. I've been like maybe 5-6 times, and I'm just still sitting there in awe most of the time. like this is wild. Like I don't understand what it is that's happening right now, but there's something going on, and I just kind of let it happen. I don't even read. Like there are some people that insist on reading, the liturgy as it's as they're performing, and I just don't. I just kind of sit there and take it all in, because I think there's sometimes you got to get your mind out of the way. You got to get out of your own way and just experience stuff and not overthink it. And that's just kind of where I made that decision going in, because I overthink everything. So I made that decision very early on that I'm just going to experience this for a while. And once I understand or am comfortable with the experience and I get what's happening, then I'll start reading along and seeing what it is. But there's something so much bigger happening that I don't even understand how you could do anything other than experience it, at least for a while.
Yeah, I'm in the exact same place. And I've just been really enjoying the sense of not being alone. Of sort of that was the one thing I realized soon after, as I was converting, basically as my mind was converting, was that I would rather be a shitty Orthodox practitioner than a really good atheist. Because there just was nothing there. Like once I started seeing the nihilistic endpoints of atheism, where it's like, okay, I mean, what are you doing things for? Like, are you just at some point you're just going through the motions? And a lot of people like to talk about hierarchies, but don't like really living in them, and that seems to be a problem, especially with right wingers or those who talk a good game, but it's like as soon as they're confronted with their own place within a hierarchy, they start bucking it or try to ignore it. And I think that's that's exactly where I'm at with the Orthodox stuff. I'm on the lowest rank. I'm the whitest belt possible,
right?
And I've been sort of dragged into certain conversations with Mike Corbell on his show and a few other things where. And I've had us very implicitly like don't listen to me. Like I'm gonna talk with no assurances and
no authority.
Very limited understanding. Yeah, no authority. Exactly. I'm just gonna talk from my perspective and hopefully not piss anyone off and
right.
or create any heresies. But which is almost impossible at that point. But yeah, I'm curious to know what your opinions on Orthodoxy becoming a sort of an online thing. My inclination recently, and I've said to people, I've been working on this piece for a while now. I have a 2-year-old, so time just kind of goes sometimes. Like I'm tired all the time, and finding time to write is precious. But so I've been working on this thing I call the humble meta, which is sort of something I'm seeing evolve around spaces where it seems to me that things are going to get smaller, and especially within sort of more distant spheres. I think that's a good thing. Like I don't think all conversations or all messages are for everybody.
Right.
We need to kind of get our head out of that. The idea of like spreading the message to the most amount of people is actually a really bad idea because the more people kind of encounter these things, if you're casting this wide net, and you're probably going to catch in a lot of people you don't actually want, and then have to deal with those people. And it's not even like people who are intentionally trying to do you harm. It's just that they're only going to get 1% of something and use it, and then start using it, start doing some weird shit in the name of that. And it's like, look, I don't want you to be Orthodox if that's the way you're going to go at it. I'd rather you just not, like, just do your thing, man, but don't get involved in this unless you're serious. And I don't know what level of commitment for that is, but like, I'd like to know what your thoughts on that is. Like, keeping things smaller in some ways, I think is better, even though I know that kind of flies against the more Christian save the souls of people kind of motif. And like, I think people need to come to it on their own terms.
I don't really have an opinion about size, because I don't think it's up to me to decide how that works out. So what I try to make sure, though, is when I get into these conversations, I'll pretty much tell people, don't ask me anything. Go listen to Father Peter Hears. He has a YouTube channel called Orthodox Ethos. Go listen to Father Josiah Trenum. I just got his book in today, and I'm excited to dig into that. Go listen to people that know what they're talking about. Don't listen to me. So I mean, that's my thing. Like, if I say something, like, typically I'll, like, when I talk about like this stuff, I'll be like, I read Father Seraphim Rose said blah blah blah, or I read Saint Sophrony said blah blah blah, or I heard Father Stephen Damick say blah blah blah. I don't, because I don't know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm absorbing, and I understand, like, and how I understand it. And so if I'm talking about the subject, it's because I'm looking for a different perspective, or someone to let me know whether or not they think I'm understanding what I'm reading or hearing properly, right? Like, am I getting this? Am I on the right track? How far away am I? Like, what does this mean? Whatever. And that's kind of where I come from. So I don't mind the conversations. I find the conversations interesting. Like listening to Matthew Erickson and Adam was really interesting. When Jay Dyer does some of his stuff, I'll listen to some of it sometimes. I'm not a really big Jay Dyer fan, but I'll listen to him sometimes when he's talking orthodoxy.
Yeah, same.
But for the most part, if I'm absorbing, like, if I want to absorb like orthodoxy, I'll turn to somebody and I'll listen to somebody who is an authority on the subject, right? So Father Peter Hears, or Father Stephen Damick, who did a great lecture series on a book he wrote called Orthodoxy and Heterodoxy, which is really, it's worth your time if you're into it. It's like 32.
I'm halfway through the audiobook.
Yeah. I don't know if I don't think it's the actual audio book that he released on the podcast catchers. I think that's actually like just it came across as lectures he was doing on the chapters, which I thought, I haven't read the book, but I found it to be interesting. So I listen to those people. And that's kind of where I turn. So I would never give anybody any kind of advice, because I honestly don't have a clue what's going on. Half the time I'm just like kind of just sitting back, absorbing, and just trying to figure it out. Though I do find talking about personal experience with these things quite interesting, which is typically what I like do with like Adam. When me and Adam Patrick sit down and talk about it, we text almost every day, and we'll talk quite a bit about our experiences, how it's coming across, like what we're seeing, how we're feeling about it, like what we think. And that's fine. I don't see anything wrong with that. I think if you're going to get online, especially someone like me, who's only been looking into it since like last October. I think I started looking into Orthodox. Like I'm not an expert on anything, you know. I'm listening to experts. So I would rather tell you to go listen to the experts than listen to anything I have to say about it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm in the exact same boat. I mean, that speaks to the humility I was referencing, is that, and then you get, you know, some people like Cyprian and stuff like that who again, my deepening annoyance with him, and I'm checking that against any kind of vainglory, pride, whatever aspects. But what I find sus about him is that there doesn't seem to be that humility aspect, and maybe it is more present in his personal life, and his online presentation is what it is, you know. Many such cases. You know, one of the reasons I like you so much, Tommy, and I like a lot of the kind of crew that we're hanging with now, is that there's a real decent authenticity that kind of runs through things. You know, I obviously don't know you in real life, but I would doubt that you're any different than what I hear on podcasts. You know, that's how I work things, you know.
Yeah.
You know, with the show, when we started, my co-host Mark and I, we ran through a few things, and if you go back to the back catalog, there's some attempts at doing more like standard show things, and you know, I had an intro and all that stuff, and we've kind of, that's all kind of gone by the wayside. And I get comments where people are like, you know, oh, why don't you have a graphic or music? And I'm like, because I don't want it. I don't
Right.
want to do that. I don't
Yeah.
want to be like, hey, you're on a show. Look at this show. Like, what are you doing? Like, but then again, my emphasis, I'm cheesy enough. I don't need more proof of it. But also, I guess my emphasis really is or my desires here is that I'm just creating sort of a catalog to give over to my kids, you know, as a hey, here's your dad going mentally through some stuff, or intellectually through some things, and you know, if this whole internet thing, you know, collapses tomorrow, then there's proof, you know, there's something to pass on. So with that as a chief desire, all the rest of it kind of feels silly otherwise, you know, like, you know, trying to get a graphic, or, you know, I don't know,
Yeah.
dancing girls in the background or something. It's like, I don't know, just not motivated for it.
What's the biggest change you've noticed in your thinking since looking into Orthodox?
It's a good question. I mean, so I kind of said before, it was, you know, my reality switched, and then I started taking things both symbolically. Started taking the symbolistic world a lot more literally. I've been listening to Pajot for a while. I actually really regret it. Before we left Montreal, there was a week there when the lockdowns on churches lifted, and I could have gone to this church, and I don't remember why it didn't happen, but there was talk about it, but it just didn't happen. It's kind of a bit of a regret. But I've been listening to Pajot for a while, just out of curiosity. And one of the things that I think changed was I just started taking that stuff for real, you know. So when I say things like demonically possessed, so there's demons and that kind of stuff, I mean that. You start to look at it.
It's like that meme. Have you seen that meme where it's like Jordan Peterson? It says how it started, and then it's Jonathan Pajot, and it says how it's going, and it says obviously Zeus exists.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that fucking meme.
No,
it's hilarious.
That's it. But that's kind of it, right? Like when you start to, again, I stop trying to be as resentful. So you start reading this stuff, not, I said this on Matt Erickson's King Pill Discord, which you should actually be part of that if you wanted. I think you'd
I'm on Discord. I just don't
good
spend a
interesting
lot
time there.
Yeah, I don't spend a lot of time on Discord. I have my own Discord, but I just don't spend a whole lot of time there unless somebody says something and get my attention, and I'm like, hey, what's up? Yeah, sorry. I'm really distracted right now. So it's like I got so much going on. I'm gonna have to have like I had to get a CT scan done this morning because I'm gonna have to have a surgery, oral surgery, and so I got a lot going on, and I'm trying to figure out how we're gonna pay for all this crap. So my dog busted me in the mouth and jacked my gums up, so I might have to have grafts and implants and all kinds of stuff done.
Brutal.
Yeah.
No, health stuff is always
big-headed pit bull, man. I'm 42 years old. I'm not 20 anymore. I shouldn't have been on the ground wrestling with that son of a bitch. So
yeah, I just turned 45, and my job is I'm doing groundskeeping at a nature daycare.
Oh, nice.
And we have a food forest and all that kind of stuff. I'll show you pictures offline sometime. And then I oftentimes will do things that like 20 years ago I would have been fine, and I can still do it. Like, physically I can still do things, but it's the next day.
Yeah, you wake up the next day and you're like, oh shit. Why did I do that?
45 is real, sorry, we go back to trying to answer your question. So the biggest kind of mental changes, so taking things a lot more literally, but also taking things a lot more symbolically. Like so I was saying on the Matt Erickson Discord, I started calling people some people kind of boat people, because they're the kinds of people who read Noah's Ark and then think it's all about the boat. It's like, it's not about the boat. It's not about the animals. It's like, but it is, but it isn't, so looking at religion, and not just religion, but all of those things, like starting to see that all of our constructs, politically, all the rest of it is really just based around a lot of symbolism that isn't logical, isn't reasonable, but is real, and you need to confront it on those levels. That's kind of what got me into I read a lot of René Girard. I'm trying to master Girard in a lot of ways, because he kind of gets to the heart of things a lot with his work on desire and scapegoating. And it's like you start reading those things like, click, 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 and then you start seeing it. And when you start seeing it, it's almost like that red pilling. You see it and then you can't unsee it. I found that stuff incredibly useful, and I think it just kind of gives me a sense of calm. Like I'm on some days I'm verging on black pilling. I don't have time. I can't. I have a kid. I don't have time to be black pilled, but I get in that kind of headspace, like, crap, you let your mind wander into the more darker recesses of what could be. But overall, when you kick it up to God a lot more, you get that sense of, well, yeah, it's going to be what it's going to be. He's led me this far. Let's give more and more trust to him. So
right, yeah,
I think that's I don't know if that's an answer, but there's a general sense of intellectual comfort that comes from it.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah. No, because we were talking about with Courtney, and this was part of the reason we wanted to do the podcast. So I did want to get to the subject a little bit before you got to go. I know you don't have like all day like you did the other day, but we'll so we were talking about pursuit of happiness, and you and her kind of got in a back and forth, and I think it was like really this a little bit speaking past each other. You both here are talking about talking about two different things, really using the same words, and I think that's actually very common nowadays. And one of the things I accredit that to is I say, like the internet and especially social media in itself has become like a Tower of Babel, and it's kind of put humanity in a situation where even though we're speaking the same language, we're speaking different languages, right? And so it happens all the time. I see it. I watch it with like between friends of mine. Like I've had situations where well, a while back, last year, I had Adam Patrick and Reed Coverdale both on the show at the same time because they'd gotten into a tiff on Twitter, and I recognized like y'all are both talking about two different things. Neither of you have any clue what the other person is talking about. And because I know both of them, I could like see what they were saying. And I was like, oh yeah, I know what you're saying. And Adam wouldn't disagree with what you're saying. And Reed wouldn't disagree with what you're saying, but you are disagreeing because you're on Twitter trying to talk two different languages to each other. And so it appears to be the same language, but it's two different languages. And whenever I look at like what you and Courtney ran into the other day with Pursuit of Happiness, that's what I saw. I saw two people speaking what sounded to be the same language, but it was two different languages y'all were speaking.
Yeah, I mean, I think also to kind of maybe build on the question of how Orthodoxy's changed me. At the same time, I was exploring Orthodoxy. I became convinced that the liberal frame is what needs to be escaped from. Just mentally, right? You need to be able to see outside of these things in order to start to grapple with what the hell this is, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I became aware with Friend or Fed was that I don't know if it really started off that way, but it's become a show about questioning your priors, your prior assumptions, your prior ideas about certain people, ideas, ideologies, etc. And the show's become a way to at least unpack it, re-examine it, and see, maybe you've changed, like maybe your relationship to something's changed. So, with the happiness thing, and I understand really why people have a reaction to it. I'm not always very good at being diplomatic with these things. But I'm trying to get better at it. Because I usually just will hit someone with the concept and just and then dig in. But my concept of happiness, of how it's being, at least
holy shit, breaking news,
been applied. What?
The FBI just raided Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago. Sorry, it just popped up on my phone. I was like, what the fuck? Oh, all right, go ahead. As you were saying.
Oh shit.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, no. I mean that'd be that.
These leftists are getting for real, dude.
About that. Yeah. We'll see. That's a lot of theater too.
That might be an interesting subject here in a couple of days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see what comes out of it.
I bet he was writing it.
Yeah. So concepts like,
I bet he hired Michael Malice to write a tell-all.
They need a scapegoat. They need a scapegoat desperately, and
no doubt.
The problem with all this stuff is there's been no catharsis. So it just keeps spinning out, and now they're losing grip with even their base. So I think they're just desperate to have someone to blame it all on. I think we're 6 months away from
you had
blaming the vaccine. And
I was just going to say, you had the whole Sandy Hook trial that just finished with Alex Jones. So they're just going to keep like trying to pile on until after the election. They're just going to keep going. And I made the comment the other day that I think Trump's a mistake. I think if you're looking to get a right winger in office right now, you should be looking solely at DeSantis. But that's just my own personal opinion. Not that I am fanboy for either of them,
or someone that we don't know
yet.
Or someone we don't know yet.
Possibly. Yeah, that could be possible.
I mean, JD
Curtis Yarvin.
No, JD Vance. JD Vance is interesting, and that guy Masters.
Yeah, Blake Masters.
All the Peter Thiel picks.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Go back to what you were saying. I apologize.
No. So yeah, so with the concept of happiness and the pursuit of happiness, I remember responding to Elon Musk on Twitter. He said something like, "Journalism is a misery factory," which is, you know, partly true. But I responded like, you know, the pursuit of happiness has led to much more destruction than journalism ever could possibly think of. And kind of what I meant by that is that people get infected with this idea that individual happiness is the most important thing in life, and it comes without, and in the Western canon, it comes without sacrifice, it comes out without responsibility, or becomes devoid of it. You know, I'm willing to toss the founders a bone and saying that the world that they lived in, because of they had to make certain they were making assumptions about life because that was the world they lived in. You know, sacrifice and responsibility were kind of baked into the pie, and we've managed over the last few hundred years to really divorce ourselves from those concepts, to the point where pursuit of happiness now becomes absolutely destructive, because it's like, okay, well, what's that moored into? Like, there's no common morality. So
well, now it's like,
and
now it'd be
what if
more accurately,
children makes me really happy.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say it'd be almost more accurately described nowadays as the pursuit of passions.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You know, I think a lot about that term success, right? You know, what is success? Because everyone talks about it, and there's thousands and thousands of videos out there telling you how to be successful and this, that, and the other thing. But no one really looks into the desire of, like, why do you want to be successful? Like, this is what Gerard has really taught me, is that all these things are external. You know, they don't come from you. That you think they do. But I mean, literally, in the pursuit of happiness, it's written on a document that you read in elementary school or high school. You get introduced to those ideas, and you're told that this thing is valuable, and so you go, okay, well, I got to do that thing. You're like, okay, but why?
Right?
Like, why do you have to? I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just simply saying why. Like, do you have an answer to the why? And most people who I pose this to are kind of just blink at you, like, well, it's self-evident. I'm like, no, it's not. I don't think it is at all. And that's the same thing with happiness. It's like, okay, you know, you and I and Courtney and whoever might have a shared moral basis, or enough of a shared moral basis that we understand that happiness, that my personal happiness shouldn't be, isn't dangerous, isn't going to lead to some really horrible things. But when you start opening that up to what in America is like, what, 330 million or whatever people, and they're all pursuing their own individual idea of happiness. Well, I mean, that's how I think you get, you know, kids getting abused in schools, and not just sexually, but like mentally, emotionally, all these other things. Because it's like, well, what if what I would consider really depraved, horrible behavior really makes someone else happy? You know, what then, as a basis to form a society on? Again, it's great if you're assuming a certain moral substructure, but since that's gone now, then what are you left with? You know, and
right.
I guess that's always what I'm getting at, is that we need to re-examine these things, not because they were written intentionally wrong or they come from let's say a bad place, but we can see the results of them now. The words that are utilized in the writings
aren't the same words we use today to describe the same thing, right? So you could look at, like, you could just look at the Second Amendment and the term well-regulated militia, and what they were intending was a militia that was always ready and armed, right? That's what they meant by well-regulated, you know. And now they consider regulated like taxed and fined and, you know, like investigated like beyond belief. And so like these words, and this is why I brought Orwell up whenever we were talking, that Orwell essay, which I think is one of the best essays that we can really utilize today, is the way he's talking about how politics changes language and how it doesn't intentionally. It neuters the language so that they can fill in. I mean, we can look at like terms like racist or bigot nowadays as opposed to 10 or 15 years ago. They don't even mean the same thing. They're not the same term. It's something completely different anymore. And so as they change these definitions and these in order to meet their criteria, then you have to start changing the way that you talk about things. And this is why in 2019 I started talking about abandoning the term libertarian, because I heard Tucker Carlson come on his show and call Hillary Clinton a libertarian. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to be associated with Hillary Clinton. So, you know, and if that's what the idea is, like, think about the millions of people that Tucker Carlson are reaching. And if the idea of a libertarian foreign policy is Hillary Clinton's foreign policy, I want nothing to do with that. So now I have to start looking at different ways to frame my discussion and my argument.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of why I really like whatever group we're hanging with now. I think there's been attempts of calling it something. I was never a libertarian. I encountered libertarianism probably in my early 20s and thought back then what I still think now, which was that was just communism with extra steps. Same thing with anarchy. I always thought it was an interesting philosophy, and I'll to be respectful, I'll call it a philosophy rather than an ideology. And certain thinkers within that movement, like Hoppe, I prefer more than others. But I never saw it as a rational way forward. You know, it always seemed to me a little bit like, well, you know, that's just not how things work. Or if you try to make that work, that's just going to be horrible. But then again, I was again much more of a liberal centrist, and certainly encountering those ideas again now, and seeing how people have adopted them and run with them. You know, I listened to a lot of Dave Smith and Michael Malice up until maybe about a year ago, because they were saying interesting things. Like I liked getting different input from you know, a more dissident kind of mindset.
Right.
But I also just look at those things and like, you're not solving anything. Like there's nothing here, you know, there's no how do you go forward with these ideas? I just don't see it. But you know, so yeah, I'm hanging with the post-libertarians mostly because of some other shared ideas, even though I was never a libertarian to begin with. Which I think gives me an interesting kind of different perspective. I always have to check it with sometimes, because I you know, with the Dave Smith Friend or Fed, I kind of knew doing it that there was going to be I knew there was going to be some predictable backlash. I kind of knew who was going to get miffy with me even putting Dave's name next to a Fed without having, you know, and the somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So I was kind of prepared for that. The mountain of it.
In the friend, start the Fed.
Guard. Oh, Jesus. And just the amount of people who are like, oh, I'm not watching that, but here's why you suck. I'm like, okay, well, there you go.
Okay. I understand how informed your opinion is, and I will leave it at that. Yeah. No, I mean, I watched part of it. I thought it was goofy. You know, I like Justin and I like LB, and like, I hadn't met you yet. And so I was like, oh, let's see what Justin and LB are doing today. And, you know, so it's like, all right, cool. That's funny. You know, I don't have any issues with Dave Smith. I actually have a lot of admiration for Dave Smith, honestly, personally. And, you know, it's for reasons other than political, though. Like I think I think Dave Smith is a genuinely good person. I really do, and I have reasons for believing
So do
that.
I.
Now,
So do I.
and yeah, and um, so yeah, I thought it was kind of a funny topic, which is why I tuned into it, because I was like, oh shit, let me hear this. You got LB and Justin on here discussing whether or not Dave Smith is a friend or a fed. This has got to be funny. And so, that's the way I looked at it. I looked at it as a tongue-in-cheek kind of, let's have a good time and just talk some shit and have some fun. Like to me, it was obvious that that's what it was. And so, like, those that didn't listen to it or got offended, like, it's just like, all right, man, like, I don't care.
Well, but I think that's the thing, going back to the pursuit of happiness and why people, you bring up certain things. And I'm always interested, I think, because I got a little bit of that troll in me of like, I want to find what's that button with you, or because I want to find what that button is with me. When do you press that thing? You go, oh wait, whoa, right? Oh, hey, we're all fun and games up to that point,
Right,
like,
right.
that's why I brought up individualism and stuff. Like I'm willing to be wrong,
Right.
I don't care about being right. I want the truth. So if the truth is all my preconceptions are incorrect or need to be addressed or remodeled, then so be it. So that's kind of what's kind of mentally been turning me on for the last little while. And again, religious experience that has a lot that I think plays into it. It was like, well, if you're wrong about that, you're probably wrong about pretty much everything else. Maybe you should look into that stuff. And I always find it interesting, really, when we did the Tucker Carlson, same thing, just from a different crowd, I haven't had any spurgies about James Lindsay yet, which is maybe more telling.
That's because he just got kicked off of Twitter, and all his fangirls are hiding.
Yeah, probably. Maybe everyone's. I know I've seen a lot of people speak out on his behalf. So,
oh really?
But maybe they're just not they're not in my sphere. So who knows?
Maybe that's it. Yeah, but he did just get kicked off of Twitter.
Yeah.
But I mean, and
that happened
I think
before we recorded.
Oh, really? I just found out about it today. So that's how out of the loop I am. One of the things that I find interesting about the crowd that we're kind of in, the group that we're in right now, is we can do like what I did with LB the other day, right? And I can come on and I can just start sparring with you. And nobody takes it personal because everybody knows, like, oh, okay, like Tommy's coming from an honest place, LB's coming from a good place, Jason's coming from a good place, Caleb's coming from a good place. So let's flesh this out. And so there's not this kind of like personal dilemma. And the only reason I would talk to anybody the way I was jabbing with LB the other day is because I respect them and I like them. If I don't know you, I'm not going to talk to you like that. I'm not going to bother most of the time, like even trying to have a conversation with you. So we run in this group that isn't afraid to disagree and isn't afraid to kind of go back and forth and spar and enjoy that. And we have enough respect for each other where if we get to a point where it's like, okay, you're irritating me now because this is just too much. You're being too nitpicky. Like, let's just back off of this topic. Everybody goes, okay, yeah, that's cool. And it's done and it's over with. And you can come back and you can kind of flush those ideas out later. And it happens sometimes, like we get annoyed and just kind of like, like what, but we know that the people that we're sparring with are coming from a good place. And that's like something different than what you experience on the internet most of the time.
Yeah, and I think it's even telling that I think, I'm sort of an outside observer with libertarian stuff, but the current infighting with the LP and LPMC and blah 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 blah, and I'm looking at that and going, look, if like you said, if you come with the assumption that the person you're arguing with or disagreeing with is actually a good person, then it does color your commentary. There's going to be a point where you draw back and go, hang on a second, I don't need to call this person a white supremacist. Like, even if and even if I think your ideas are going that way, the question really is like, okay, do I really need to assume that, or can I assume something else?
Right. Yeah. Is there another explanation? Is there another explanation for why you're saying the things you're saying? Why do you think that? Like, where are you getting this from? Like, yeah. And it's all, it's all reasonable, fair exchange of ideas. When we talk, like, whenever I go after and chat with like LB or anybody that I'm close to about individualism, I'm doing it from a specific framework, and I'm just trying to let them see, like, this is the framework that this appears under. Like, you're talking about it from this other angle, but let's talk about it from here, because this is the way it looks to other people, right? I understand what you're saying, but what you're saying, it does not jive with how people view what you're saying. And so I think it's very, it's helpful for me to have people like Pete or Buck or LB in my circle, that are a little bit more educated and have been more on the academic side more often than I have. And I hope that it's helpful for them that I'm able to come in and say, from like this blue collar like standpoint, and say, "Look, that's not the way normal people view this, though. Like, this is what normal people see." And you can say that all day long, but it doesn't matter. It's not going to like absorb into them, because what they see, the way they view the world is such and such and such and such. And I hope that's helpful, because that's what I try to accomplish and bring to the table when we're having these conversations.
I come from a very kind of similar perspective, where I worked in restaurants as a bar manager, restaurant manager, bartender, all that kind of stuff for a very long time. So a lot of the conversations I'm having with people are just with people, and usually people a few drinks in, and that's usually when people get really, really honest,
Right. Yeah. El Vino Veritas.
They'll let down. Yeah. The mask slips a little bit, and and you can actually have a bit of a conversation with the person behind it, sometimes more than not. But so that's kind of where I'm came from. And now I'm just trying to avoid actual in real life human contact as much as possible, but which has been going pretty well. But yeah, I come from that same kind of angle, where a lot of the conversations I have with the academically minded is a little bit like, okay, yeah, I can understand. I can read the books too, and I get it. I have a full comprehension of what you're putting out there.
Right.
The thing is that everyone else doesn't, and that's what I was saying about James Lindsay, and academics in general, is that maybe our job in some ways, or what the role that we can fulfill, is listening to that stuff and retranslating it for the common man. I think that's important, because no one's if I give Jay Dyer to a local farm around here, he's just not gonna. It's not that he can't comprehend the stuff. If he really sat down and listened to it, he just doesn't have time and probably zero interest.
Yeah.
But if I can distill all that and put it in some way that they can understand in a conversation, oh, okay, and then they start waking up to certain things,
right?
Or expanding to, it's trying to get people to a broader mindset,
right?
Which I think right now is probably the best time to do it, because there's a lot of people starting to go, hey, so that whole COVID thing, that whole 2 years thing, what was that all about? And,
right, yeah,
the farmer strikes, and
yeah,
I think people are starting to question a lot of more things, and I'm hearing that from very, very blue pilled normies, coming
Yeah.
coming around going, what was that thing you were saying 2 years ago? Well, you were pretty right about that.
Yeah. How did you see this coming? Yeah, exactly. Well, man, we've been going an hour, and I know you have things to do in the morning. There in the upside down world, as Jonathan Pajot calls Australia. So
Yeah, well, it literally is.
plug everything you got to plug, dude.
2-Bit Podcast. We're mostly on YouTube. We're also on Spotify and Anchor FM. I just uploaded all the Friend or Fed stuff up to there yesterday, so that's fairly up to date. We have a weekly show with my co-host and best friend Mark. Usually we do that on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we do other shows as well. I'm popping up here and there. I'm really grateful for being your guest and getting my voice out there a bit more is very. I'm very grateful. I think it's an interesting time to be alive. So
yes, it is, and we'll definitely do it again. We'll dig into some other subjects.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I always kind of take my first interview with somebody as kind of an introduction, and so the next time you're on, we'll really dive deep into something and just dig into it.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, brother. Well, I'm gonna stop the recording.
You're standing open. Yep.
You wanna be a hero, said you're just a slave. All your good intentions took you to your grave. Your pride is how they killed you. With the flag you wave just like a fool. They promised you a mountain, gifted you a stone. They demanded that you throw it into your neighbor's home, and then seize all that they worked for and give it to the throne just like a tool. Well, as we all just stand in line and glorify new ways of being cruel, it seems to me humanity is not something that they're teaching us in school. They dumbs down all around, propaganda, their pollution. They set a cage up on the stage, a facade for all solution. They build a wall, block them all from this mental institution. It's insane. Now they're writing their own rule books and they're crossing all their T's. They're fashioning their people to all wear beggars' knees. If you want a clean drink of water, well, you must say pretty please. It's all a game. As we all just stand in line and justify these crimes done in our names, it seems to me authority and tyranny are both one and the same. Well, it's time to change the channel. It's time to set things right. Make them all rot with fear in their beds at night. Devour all their worthless souls and sacrificial right, just like we should. Of those who are to blame, and we'll stack them up like cordwood, watch them sizzle on the flames for good. Well, as we all just stand in line waiting for some kind of Robin Hood, our liberty will never be until our right to freedom is understood. Thank you.